It's back to school time for San Diego's public schools. From later start times to healthier meals, we look at some of the changes this year. A budget crunch for schools in the South Bay. Sweetwater says it can't pay for buses and other basic services. Parents pressure the district to find a solution. And from high school to elementary, San Diego's kids answer whether they feel safe at school. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer. And joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today, Adriana Heldiz, interactive producer, a voice of San Diego, KPBS reporter John Carroll, education reporter Kristen Takeda of the San Diego Union Tribune, and Will Huntsberry, reporter also at Voice of San Diego. Well, summer is over and school is back in for more than 100,000 San Diego Unified students. The district's leaders facing wide-ranging challenges focused on the wellness of students in a rollout for the media this week. And we'll get to that in a minute. But Kristen, let's start with the declining enrollment, that is, how that impacts the policy of letting families choose which schools that their kids are attending.
Yeah, so this is something that's kind of been happening over the past few years, is as enrollment declines the district has been kind of trying to minimize the number of students who leave their neighborhood schools to go to different schools across the district, and that has a lot of implications for those neighborhood schools that are left behind, because if students are leaving them, then they also bring state money with them, since money follows the student. But it's kind of like the district needs to find a way to balance choice with neighborhood schools, and lifting up those neighborhood schools and making sure that they're not, left behind, to put it in a certain way. Yeah,
and you've reported many students are choosing to leave their neighborhood schools. Explain the tension between giving families school choice and trying to keep kids in their neighborhood schools by improving poor performing schools.
Yeah, so that's what the district is trying to do with those neighborhood schools, is
keep the kids at home.
Yeah, lift them up and things like that. Because I think what's happening partly is that there are certain choice offerings of different programs and things like that are at these choice schools, but that has been drawing away students from the neighborhood schools. So what the district needs to do is offer either similarly competitive or attractive programs at the neighborhood schools, or just otherwise kind of convince the public that the neighborhood schools are very much a viable choice too. And so it's kind of a balancing act there.
Well,
yeah, San Diego Unified, I think their plan, right, Kristen, is to try to make every school in San Diego a quality neighborhood school. That's their Vision 2020 that they've laid out. But when parents are choosing out of those schools, I think that creates a tension, right? Because they want a good school in every neighborhood, and that means they need to kind of make sure schools aren't under-enrolled. They might throttle choice back here or there to try to achieve that goal, but there's definitely a tension between that choice and quality neighborhood schools.
Yeah, and a lot of people say parents shouldn't have to be leaving schools to find a quality school. They should be able to have one in their own neighborhood. So yeah, same thing.
And the flip side of that is schools in more desirable areas, La Jolla, for example, they lament that limiting choice means they lose some diversity with more students of color in a mostly white community, right?
Yeah, so part of that is related to that there have been federally funded programs that essentially transport students from maybe more diverse neighborhoods to schools like La Jolla High. And so with the wind down of those programs and the funding is going away for that, that means that it kind of restricts a lot of students' ability to choose another school or go to another school. And so that also is kind of an equity issue, in that if you can't transport yourself, if you don't have the means to go to physically go to another school or have a car, then you are having a limited choice versus other more well-off families. And so that's part of it too.
Well, let's move to a struggling school and a struggling neighborhood, Lincoln High. A lot has been written about this particular school. Tell us about the shakeup among administrators there and what that means for Lincoln going into this school year.
Yeah, so in June, right as the school year was ending for Lincoln High, the district suddenly announced that they were removing all of their principals, all 4 of them, from the school, and they didn't really give much of an explanation why, but Lincoln has been struggling with low academic performance and also high leadership turnover for years, and it's just kind of an issue that the district hasn't really been able to solve for a long time. And so they're trying again with a new principal. This new school year, they just put in a new principal who was leading another middle school in the district, but she has experience teaching at Lincoln before, so they're hoping that another new leader will kickstart some change, but we'll see how that goes.
Well, right, that's certainly one to follow up on as the year goes on. A renewed emphasis teaching of math, where Black and Hispanic students have been underrepresented in advanced classes, right?
Yeah, so that's something else the district is starting this year, is that they've been noticing that students of color, specifically Black and Hispanic students, are underrepresented in advanced or accelerated math classes, and so they're trying to address that inequity partly by introducing this new math pathway they call enhanced math, and it's supposed to be as rigorous as advanced or accelerated math, but the end goal for that math pathway is the same. It would go to like calculus and other advanced classes, but the difference is, unlike accelerated math, you don't have to have any prerequisites, but the whole idea of this is is when it comes to sorting students into math or regular math or advanced math, there are often inequities and disparities that come into play that are not they're not really the students' fault. It's not because the student was necessarily just lower ability, but they weren't given the opportunities earlier to have advanced math in the first place, and those disproportionately affect students of color. So that is something that they're hoping will fix that disparity.
Okay, and the ultimate goal of all these kids, of course, is graduation. And Will, you reported this summer on local college attendance rates. What were some of the takeaways from that data?
Yeah, we got some new college going data, it's called, so it tells us how many kids are going to college. We've kind of always known the overall figure, but we found out a lot more detailed information this time. The main takeaway is that I think San Diego Unified's graduation rate's about 85%, about 72% of students go to college. So, I mean, that sounds really good, right? I mean, that's not a bad figure. But when you drill down in the data, you notice several things. I think the thing that sticks out the most to me was that Latino students' college going rate has been stubbornly behind all other groups, and that's not a needle San Diego Unified's been able to move. You know, while they were at 72% as a district, I think 63% of Latino students went to college, even though they make up the by far the biggest percentage of students in the district, Latino students. So there was struggling there. The other takeaway, a lot of students go to community college, more than any other group, more than those who don't go, more than those who don't go to four-year colleges. And what we know about community college is that while it is great, it's affordable, it can provide a career, about 70% of people don't finish. So we should know that going into the college going rate, that there's a lot of people going who aren't finishing, and that's something the state's got to figure out how to deal with.
Okay, more challenges there, of course. We're going to get back to the focus on wellness at San Diego Unified rolled out this week. And Chris, tell us about the healthy start times. This has been an issue a long time. Teenagers, not only they don't want to get up in the morning, biologically, there's studies that show you really can't learn, and they're getting tired through the day by these early start times, right?
Yeah, so this idea of having later start times as being healthier for adolescents is that the idea, and some research has backed this up, is that teenagers are more likely to benefit from more sleep in the morning. Like they're something about their biological clocks is set so that it's worse for them to get up earlier, and so that's why the district has been rolling out these later start times. They started with they've been starting it, but they have 3 schools that piloted it this school year. So, and then starting next year, all middle and all high schools will be having this later start time, no earlier than 8:30. So I guess that could be seen as good news for families or for students who don't want to wake up early, but at the same time, it's faced some opposition statewide because it can complicate bus schedules for school districts or also parents.
It could. So good news for the kids who get to sleep in, but maybe not so much for mom and dad and others who have to get them to school. All right, well, we'll follow up on that and a lot of this stuff as we see what happens through the school year. We're going to move on now. We turn now to fallout this week from the financial problems plaguing the Sweetwater Union High School District. A $30 million budget crisis has led to severe cuts in bus routes for 4 schools, with San Ysidro High, that is, the hardest hit. Of 29 bus routes cut by the district, 20 are at San Ysidro High. And John, you were looking at that very contentious meeting this week. Contentious might be an understatement. Give us the scene, what happened at that school board meeting this week with these cuts.
Well, this has been an issue that's been roiling for a while now because the cuts were first announced back in May. So the parents have had time to build up steam, and at the meeting earlier this week, more showed up and they were louder. They made these like paper mache buses and stuff that they were holding up and saying, don't cut our bus routes. The district says that San Ysidro is a special case because of the roads that surround it. For many years, they were not deemed to be safe for the students to walk to school. Now all the work, especially on Otay, I believe it's Otay Mesa Road, yes, has all been completed. And so the district says, okay, well, that concern is no longer there. And along with what you mentioned, the $30 million shortfall, and that's a whole other story, by the way. There are accusations of fraud, and the SEC is now looking into it.
We talked about that on the show, yeah.
Yeah. So they felt, well, we have to do something, and so it was never supposed to, according to Manny Rubio, the district spokesperson, it was never supposed to last forever, these bus routes. Mm-hmm. The understanding apparently back then, according to him, was that when all the road work was done, that some of those bus routes would go away, and that's what's happened.
Well, Adrienne, at the meeting, that didn't sit too well, saying, geez, we never really have to give you bus routes here, and it just causes such a nightmare, as we'll get to in a moment, with one student in particular, right?
Yeah, one parent has said, we understand that you're not required by, the state to provide transportation from home to school, but it's disappointing that now that you're in this financial crisis, that, you're I think she said the generosity is like, it has an expiration date.
Right.
So for them, it's kind of like, if you weren't in this position, you probably would have kept our buses.
Well, we have a clip here from a 19-year-old, Hector Castro. He graduated last year from San Ysidro High, but says his younger sister still attends. Let's hear what he had to say.
They have to walk up this canyon road with scorching hot weather. They have to prepare a meal or some sort of refreshment to be able to walk up this hill. This canyon road has rodents, has snakes, coyotes. It's a very dangerous road.
All right, well, that is a segue for us into your story this week. You decided to, a very clever idea, you decided just to focus on one student and what the journey is, I guess is the way to put it, for just to get back and forth to school on one day, an in-depth look. First, tell us about this student, and his mother must have been among the most outspoken at that meeting, right?
Yeah, so I met Jose Luis and his mother at a district meeting, and she had spoken to the board about how her son was getting rashes walking to school every day because of bugs along Otay Mesa Road, which is right next to a canyon. And, she was really worried about him because he would go to school early in the morning. He would start walking like around 5:20. So after the meeting was over, I just asked her if I could join him in his walk. And so the next couple of days later, I woke up around the same time that he does every day, which is around 4:30, and I walked with him, and I got to know him on the way up. And once school was out, I got to walk with him on the way down as well.
All right, well, walk us through that day kind of specifically there. First of all, we should say Mom can't drive him because she works nights, and he's actually up at 4:30 and gone before she gets home from her job, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay. So it's dark, it's 4:30 in the morning, and off we go. What happens then?
Right. So he starts walking by himself.
And we should say he's a sophomore.
Yes.
15 years old, I want to say.
He's 14 years old. He'll be 15 in October.
Okay.
But he walks up this hill by himself, starting around 5:20. Very dark, and it's all uphill. And sometimes, it does get hot. Obviously, it's summer. But once he gets there, he has 0 period because he's involved in a lot of clubs, including ASB. So he has to be there earlier than most of the students.
You talk about the sleep-in times that we were at.
Exactly, yeah. He doesn't have the chance to sleep in.
And then start in at 7 with the club meetings.
Exactly, yeah. So at 7, and after that particular day, his class was also, he had physical education after ASB. So you would see the irony in that, he just made this 3-mile journey up a hill, and he has to take a class to make sure he's physically suited.
All right. Well, we do have a clip from him, his own words here, as you walked with him. Let's hear some of that.
How long does it take you to get home usually?
Between 1 hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours.
And what do you do once you get home?
I do homework, and then if I have time to eat, I'll eat.
And what time do you wake up next morning?
Between 4:30 and 4:45.
Well, we talk about dropout rates sometimes when we do these segments on schools. This is a colossal challenge for this young man, and I assume others now with this bus crisis there, to simply get to school and back. It's got to be very discouraging.
Yeah, at the Sweetwater board meeting this week, he spoke to them, and he had said that he's seen some of his classmates who also have to walk that hill, that their grades have started to also dip because when they get to school, they're just exhausted from walking. And when they get back from school in the afternoon, they just they're tired from the entire day of learning. Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's definitely affecting them in more ways than they would have thought.
And looking at your interactive feature, this is more than a 12-hour thing just to get back and forth to school, do the classes, do the meetings, and walk home again at night.
Yeah, it's a full day. It's 3 miles up a hill and then 3 miles down the hill. And it's during summer, so the temperatures are definitely rising.
Okay, and Jose Luis Perez, what does he see as his future here? I mean, he sounds like a pretty discouraged young man, and we're only at the start of the school year.
Right. So when I was walking with him, I was asking him about his plans after high school, and he's still trying to figure it out. I asked him if he had any colleges in mind, and he straight out said to me, number one's a kid from San Isidro, which was really disappointing to hear. But I guess coming from a low-income community and constantly
lives with his mom in the trailer park.
Right, exactly, and having bus routes being cut, going to a school that's been I would say like in the back burn of many people's minds. It's definitely played into his
all right, we
chances of moving on.
We do have one more clip. He was at the Monday night meeting that we talked about at the outset here and spoke during the public comment portion. Let's hear some of that.
We shouldn't be suffering or risking our lives for your mistakes. This is unacceptable, and something needs to be done before someone gets injured, kidnapped, or killed while walking to school and back. Until these issues are resolved or dealt with, we are in a crisis whether you believe it or you don't. Students matter. We will not stay quiet and let our voices be heard. Thank you for your time.
All right, we're about to close this segment, but John, where's the Sweetwater High School Board? Where do they leave this issue? Any chance the bus routes might come back here?
They restored a couple of basically what Manny Rubio described as shuttles that will sort of both do separate loops, and they're trying to maybe get some more of the kids that would have otherwise been out of luck. But other than that, he was pretty tough on that and said this district is sticking by their decision and that they don't have to provide these. There's a 3.5 mile rule. And if they're inside 3.5 miles to school,
then young man,
that's that.
Well, we'll see what happens. We're out of time on this. We'll see what happens going forward and follow that one up as well. Well, school shootings are a constant horrific reminder that safety is of utmost concern for students attending class in a nation awash in guns. Yet there are many other safety concerns for students, parents, and teachers and school staff that exist in the shadow of school shootings. San Diego Unified is attempting to shine some light on this with its annual survey of how safe students feel in their schools. And Will, your story in Voice this week reveals the results of that survey. Let's start with a little background.
Sure.
What it asked, who responded, what's the purpose of the survey?
Yeah, so it's called the California Healthy Kids Survey. It's done at most schools every year, and it asks a whole lot of questions, actually. I won't even try to get into them. It asks how motivated students are and how caring adults are. What we focused on is how safe students feel inside their school. So the question is, do you feel safe in school?
Okay. And the response percentage varies a lot from school to school, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody, it's not 100% responding to this survey.
Well, yes, the response rates vary, definitely. The response, for elementary school students, parents have to say they can fill out the survey. But, the thing that stuck out to me even more was the disparity in how much students feel safe at school. In elementary school, 77% district-wide. But you have several schools where 100% of students who took the survey reported feeling safe. You can imagine those schools were north of 8. Mm-hmm. And a lot of schools where the percentage was low. The percentage at some elementary schools dipped below 50%, which I think in elementary school is rough. In middle school and high school, there's kind of a push towards students feeling less safe in school. Maybe they're becoming more aware of school shootings. There's more fights going on. But elementary school, that's not what you want to hear, that less than 50% of students feel safe inside a school.
Oh, that's disturbing, to say the least. Which among the San Diego high schools are ones where students were reporting not feeling safe?
Well, Lincoln High School is a good example. We talked about Lincoln earlier, and it's had persistent issues with academic achievement, but also violence. And I think that comes across in the statistic. I think it was in the 40s or the 30s, what percentage ninth graders felt safe at Lincoln. It was ninth graders for high school, seventh graders for middle school, and fifth graders for elementary school that took the survey.
All right, and of course we talked about shootings, and that's the cloud that's over all of us in the society and certainly at schools. But what are some of the other reasons that are causing students and parents to say we don't really feel safe at our school?
Sure, yeah. I mean, take Porter Elementary, for example, a school we've covered quite a bit with significant safety challenges. 70% of students feel safe there. And I spoke with one family. Monique Hayes was the mother, and she said her son had been bullied. He'd witnessed a lot of fights. She had witnessed several fights. She said she'd broken up 3 fights at the school herself. And these safety issues really rippled out into her whole family.
Yeah, there was a really interesting aspect of your story. I don't think people realize that. You think, oh, this kid's being bullied, and that's terrible. But it's not just the one child.
No, that's right, because then that child stops wanting to go to school. They start throwing fits. In this case, he didn't want to get dressed in the morning, and he had 2 younger siblings. So that meant the mom couldn't get them dressed and ready for school.
And everybody's on a schedule.
Right. Everybody starts being tardy. They start missing more days. This bullying really impacted that whole family.
And it creates chaos. And of course, we've talked, we've done a number of stories throughout society on bullying. It's a huge problem in society. But when you get down to the granular level here, what can be done in that family's instance? What can be done about this situation?
Well, I think that parent went to school administrators often and frequently, asking them for a new safety plan, and she felt like she was stonewalled. I heard the same from other parents. I hope that's part of what this data can do, by us publishing the database of it, which San Diego Unified hadn't done. They had made the data a little more difficult to find. I hope this can empower parents to go to their school and say, what are we doing to make kids feel safe here specifically? Because I know at Bird Rock and La Jolla Elementary, the kids feel really safe. So what can we do here to change it?
Right, and what's the response? You guys cover this as a beat. What are you hearing from the schools in terms of the response to surveys and complaints like this one about bullying?
Well, I hear the district talk a lot about how it encourages, or it's been trying to address bullying mainly through trying to publicize bullying reporting avenues more often, I guess mainly online. So I think that's something that they've been saying is one of their solutions to the issue. But I think and this is something that schools everywhere, I think, are needing to address, is how to address discipline, because there are kind of mixed results on, for example, restorative discipline, how that's being implemented. And that's the idea of that is, to stop like on the one hand, you want to, make sure there's order in schools, but on the other hand, you don't want to end up suspending a lot of students and kicking them out of school.
Students of color.
Yes, that disproportionately affects students of color. Right. But at the same time, I think I've heard from a lot of teachers who don't think that is being implemented correctly, and it's creating even more disorder in classrooms by just letting students stay there and not really addressing the bullying if they just keep staying in the classroom and just doing whatever.
We're almost out of time. Does it seem like there's being progress being made, Will?
Yeah, what they told me when I published this database was that they use the survey results to work with individual schools, but that was kind of vague. I didn't get a sense beyond that. I think parents will take a lot of note, and I think it will empower parents to talk to their board members and their district leaders to say, what kind of curriculum, what kind of social, emotional stuff are you doing in my school?
Okay, good. Well, another one to follow up on. The school year's nice. We can follow up as it progresses here on all of these stories we raised. Well, that does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guest, Adriana Heldiz, a Voice of San Diego, John Carroll of KPBS News, Kristen Takeda of the San Diego Union Tribune, and Will Huntsberry, also of Voice of San Diego. And a reminder, all the stories we discussed today available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today, and join us again next week on the Roundtable.